here's a quick run through of how to get started and get going with your sound effects assignment. So you've hopefully found this clip of Ratatouille off of Schoology. It has no audio attached to it, so you're gonna have to watch it a few times and think critically about what's making sound. Then your job is to find sound effects, layer them up in Premiere, and create as realistic of a soundscape as possible. So just looking at the first few seconds here, I'll kind of go through my process of what I'm looking at. Like this first frame, literally we see Ratatouille kind of coming down from wherever he was and kind of probably thud onto the countertop. And then I'm looking at kind of padding noises, pad across the table or the countertop here. Already this stove is, gas stove making noise as it's burning this soup. Maybe a creaking for the crank, pad, hitting some metal utensils, getting up to here. You've got water droplets, etc. So just even in the first 10 seconds, man, we've got a bunch of things to consider for what kind of sounds we're looking for. Where you're going to be grabbing sounds, perhaps a good resource to use is like freesound.org. If you haven't made an account yet, it's worth doing so. They've got a great search tool, and you can search their sounds by browsing the different tags and hopefully finding some decent clips that you're looking for. It's like the first thing I was thinking about is we're in a restaurant, and a typical restaurant kitchen is loud and chaotic and has a certain ambiance to it. So I just kind of started searching around for restaurant background noise and kind of came up with this clip here. Just kind of general chaos in the background. So I started downloading a few clips. I'm going to get organized first before I even get into Premiere with all of my pieces here. So on my desktop, I've got 4 sound effects I'm going to start with and my Ratatouille clip. So as always, start with a new folder. We're calling this Sound Soup or whatever you want to call it. And then you'll be continually dumping your files together in one location. Now, when you're downloading sounds, probably like me, they're going to come with some crazy file name like this, and you're going to lose track of what's what pretty quickly. So like this sound effect here, I downloaded sound of a gas stove. If you ever had one at your house, you know it has a very unique and distinct sound. So I'm going to rename that file by doing a single click, and then another single click allows me to edit it, or I can right click on it and rename. This one was that kitchen ambiance I just showed you that I downloaded. All of these I downloaded off of freesound.org, kitchen ambiance. This was just kind of a thud that I'm going to use for Ratatouille thudding down onto the countertop. This was some footsteps on tile. Barefoot walking on tiles is what I found. So I'm going to use these as my footsteps and talk about how we can slice up that sound effect and make the timing proper in our timeline. So I've got a good starting place here, and I can continue to add sound effects into that folder, but let's hop into Premiere and look at how this first few sections can come together here. So new project, I'm calling it Sound Soup, and I'm going to browse to my new folder I've created here, browse, desktop, Sound Soup, choose, click OK. Okay, so the first piece is with Premiere. I'm hoping you're getting more confident with, but if not, we drag all of our ingredients so far into the project panel so that Premiere can recognize them. We're going to set our timeline with the video clip, Ratatouille making soup. Plunk that over here. So it technically has an audio track, it looks like, but you can even see visually here there's nothing there. There's no sound attached at all. So maybe just to save yourself an audio channel, you'd want to do something like this, where you unlink the video from the audio that is technically there, even though it's not anything, and just delete on your keyboard. So the first thing I'm going to add in is the kitchen ambiance. That's just the background noise of a busy restaurant kitchen. That's just going to be in the background, continually going on. Already though, my first problem is that's way too loud. So we covered this in a previous assignment, but just as a review, to be able to quickly make changes to the levels or the sound volume, you have a few options. One is to zoom in using these dots on your audio tracks here. And then you have access to this little white bar where you can decrease the dBs, decibels, or increase the decibels of this sound effect. I want mine to come down quite a bit, and I can kind of alter that as I go. Find a happy medium. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that be for now. It definitely needs some trimming as well. And then I might have certain sections where the kitchen ambiance is louder or softer, but for now, let's just at least trim it down. And that's going to be just kind of always going on in the background. Okay. So since that's a background noise, it might be best to perhaps put that on like audio channel 3. So it's just kind of way down here. It'll still play. Then I have more space to kind of immediately work through this area here on audio channel 1, A1, and audio channel 2. So the first thing I noticed again was Ratatouille thudding down onto the countertop. And I'm going to be using occasionally this tool up here, step forward one frame, where I can kind of fine tune each frame of this animation and figure out when exactly does that thud happen, right? But let's see what our sound effect looks like here. So it's about yay long. And if I zoom in here, I can see on my sound file that this little peak here represents the actual sound that happens. Let's see how well that matches up. Not horrible. Let's go back to the beginning. I could maybe fine-tune that even a little better. Let's see if I go forward a frame. I want my sound to kind of happen right about here, and you can see it's a little bit behind schedule. So I could maybe trim that audio clip up a little bit and then move this sound effect down so that the peak here, this sound effect peak, where I can see the actual mountaintop of the sound waveform here, matches up now a little bit better with the moment where Ratatouille hits the counter. And again, is that a sound that needs to be that loud? Probably not. That's a bit much for just a subtle little thud that I don't really need to hear necessarily super loud. I want to hear maybe a little more than that. I'll bring up the level a touch from there. There, maybe that's good. And honestly, I can barely hear my kitchen ambiance, so I might bring that up a little bit as well. Okay, so I got to start. Okay, so then the next moment in time that I wanted to feature as a sound, let's see, what else do I have? I got these footsteps. Let's talk about that next. Zoom back out on my timeline here. So the section of time that Ratatouille's kind of running looks like 1, 2, 3 or 4 footsteps that are really, I want to feature. So I'm going to drag these footsteps in on a separate track here for now. And then looking at this sound file, I can see some specific moments where these footsteps happen. There's one right about here. I see a little peak right here in the audio track. Another one right about here, right about here. The problem is those don't necessarily match up with the timing of Ratatouille running around. So what might be wise to do here is to use the razor tool and just kind of slice out these little peaks so that I can kind of individually use those. So cutting through this sound effect a few times, and I can go back to my selection tool and just delete areas that are just kind of downtime in between these sound effects. So now I've got this thud here that I can move individually to wherever I want it to be. So let me go forward a few frames here, I've got my initial thud, and then maybe that's where I want to hear a footstep, right about here. And I'm on audio track 2, so you can see I can overlap these sound effects, and they'll play nice with each other. I'll step forward again, and let's see, I'll need another pad right about there. Maybe one more frame down where he's really landing. Maybe that's where I bring this sound effect to here. And then a couple more frames forward. He kind of does a few more pads here, which I have a little sound effect there for already, which might be good. And then one more big kind of step there. So I'll kind of try to match that peak up with that sound. Maybe I'll slide it down a little more. Something like that. And then maybe I'd add some kind of sound for when the crank gets kind of turned by his body. But the rest of this audio file I don't really need, so I can just delete it. Let's hear how we're coming so far here. Okay, not bad. And then this gas stove is meanwhile in the background here, creating noise all the while. But my problem now is, I'm out of audio tracks. That's actually no problem at all. I can continue to add tracks in just by right-clicking and saying add track. And voila, I have a new audio track. It's A2. It's shifted everything down, but I've got this new space where I can either move these other sound effects up or drop in something like this gas stove sound effect that should be featured really kind of like all throughout this scene until we don't necessarily see it. Maybe it gets a little louder here, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let me just go ahead and drop that in, and then we'll edit the volume in a moment here. So gas stove is on. Certainly a bit loud. Let's bring the level down a little bit. Go back and see how that all comes together here. Excuse me. And now this part's interesting because we get more zoomed in. We're closer to the fire. That happens right about here. So what if we cut our file here, and then what we can do is increase the excuse me. We can increase the audio level on this second piece here because we're a little closer. We're a little louder. So let's see how that transition works. A little closer, and then we kind of zoom back out pretty quick. Let's see, right about here, we're kind of zoomed back out. What if I cut once again? And we're even farther away than we were in the initial shot. So I'm going to bring that audio level down further than I was in that initial shot. Let it play. And then he's even getting further away here. I might even do another cut right here and bring that audio down even a little more as we're kind of getting further and further away. And then by here, we don't see the stove necessarily anymore, so out of sight, out of mind, really. I could just cut it here with the razor tool and delete the rest of that audio file. And then I'd be on to the next problem. I've got a faucet swinging out, so I'd need some kind of metallic sound, and then we've got water drips and all sorts of other things happening in the next 10 seconds. But to my eye, those are all the things that I'd notice in the first 10 seconds of this clip that make sound. So with my tracks here, I kind of have that initial thud. I've got the gas stove in varying levels of intensity, at least 4 to my eye. I've got a few footsteps on tile, barefoots on tile, which is close enough to the countertop here. And then meanwhile, all the while, I've got this kitchen ambiance that's just kind of playing in the background. Not a bad start. So then I would just continue to download more sound effects, maybe take it 10 seconds at a time, grab sound effects, keep adding tracks as you go, shift things around as you need, adjust the levels, use that razor tool, have fun.